Hi, it's Katrina. The Kalista Head. Discovered by archaeologist Jose Garcia Bayón in 1933, the Kalista Head is a terracotta head featuring alleged Roman features that was found oddly out of place in Mexico's Toluca Valley. The object was found under a pyramid in a grave 3 stories below. It was discovered alongside an array of other, less out-of-place artifacts, including gold, copper, and turquoise objects, as well as items made from pottery, rock crystal, bone, and shell. Because of what many people consider to be Roman characteristics, some have speculated that the head is a sign of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact between the ancient Romans and people of the Americas. The artifact's age is largely disputed amongst experts. While some claim that it may date back as far as the 9th century BC Rome, others put its age at a far more realistic 1476 to 1510 AD. So how did it get there? There are of course several theories. One contends that it's simply a hoax, and that one of Bayón's colleagues placed it at the site as a sort of practical joke against the archaeologist. Another possibility is that one of the earliest Europeans to arrive in central Mexico brought it along with them, even if the object is unusually old for the things one would expect European conquerors to be carrying along with them on a transatlantic voyage. Another theory is that the head was traded throughout Asia following its manufacture in ancient Rome, and made its way to the Americas via a Chinese or Indian trading ship via a trans-Pacific route. Which of these theories do you like the most? Do you think this is realistic? Let me know in the comments below. Prehistoric storytelling. The late 2019 discovery of a cave painting on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi is thought to be the oldest known example of one of the most important things that makes us human: a recorded story. Dating back to roughly 43,900 years ago, the artwork was found in a cave at a remote archaeological site called Liang Bulu Sipong 4. Situated nearly 10 feet off the floor and spread across a 14.8-foot span of rock wall, the image depicts a hunting scene involving a face-off between unusually small human hunters versus a coalition of wild pigs and anoa, or dwarf buffalo. The dark red painting is located within what's known as a living cave. In other words, a changing landscape which is still being shaped by the water that flows through it. Cave deposits covering the artwork date back 43,900 years, meaning the image itself is at least that old, but it could be even older. Archaeologist Maxime Albert, who analyzed the painting, theorized that it shows an event called a game drive, which involved driving animals toward a prepared formation of human hunters. It could represent the painter's day job, and appears to qualify as the earliest ever example of recorded storytelling. Skeptics, on the other hand, suggest that the image features mythical human-animal hybrids, therefore implying a more spiritual context. These types of creatures have been identified in other cave drawings, including in France's world-famous Lascaux caves, and could be the earliest pictorial record of storytelling representing religious figures. Regardless of whether the artwork represents a real or abstract situation, it is still the title holder for the world's oldest recorded story. Ancient expert beekeepers. We all know that bees are extremely important to our ecosystem and even survival, and so did ancient people. A 2017 study revealed the discovery of ancient honeycombs at the Forcello archaeological site in northern Italy, citing them as evidence of ancient beekeepers once inhabiting the region. The charred honeycombs, some of which contained preserved honeybees, were found scattered on the floor of a workshop in an Etruscan trade center, along with a pollen and honey mixture known as bee breads, and the remains of a grapevine honey produced by traveling beekeepers. This suggests that the ancient Etruscans were expert beekeepers 2,500 years ago. A closer analysis of the site and its artifacts revealed the presence of beeswax and honey throughout a sizable portion of the workshop. Oddly, the honeybees fed partially on aquatic plants that were not known to grow in the region, leading researchers to believe that the bees were sourced from beekeepers who traveled along rivers by boat. As they went from place to place, their bees harvested the honey and beeswax at various workshops along the way. The unique grapevine honey found at the site was produced using pre-domesticated or early domesticated grapevine varieties. While beekeeping was an important component of the ancient world, solid evidence of it is largely lacking, since honeycombs are perishable and just disintegrate over time, making the discovery an extremely rare one. It more or less confirms the account of Pliny the Elder, a Roman scholar who wrote that residents of Ostiglia, a village located roughly 20 miles from the site, actively practiced beekeeping. Chinese artifact in North America. An amateur artifact hunter was out strolling on the banks of a stream in Georgia in the United States when he supposedly found a partially exposed ancient Chinese sword. The alleged discovery supposedly happened in July 2014 and was the latest of a series of so-called misplaced Chinese artifacts that have turned up in recent years. The 12-inch-long weapon was provisionally identified as being made from a rare mineral called lizardite, which exists in both the northern and southern hemispheres. But many more tests are necessary to determine the material's origin and type, and there are any number of explanations as to how the sword got there. To some, the reportedly one-of-a-kind artifact of its type ever found in North America indicates that people traveled to the continent from China way before Christopher Columbus. But the soil around the sword was admittedly disturbed at some point, tests showed, and many of the symbols and shapes that the artifact bears are unidentified. Still, people sometimes like to make connections where none may exist, and even some scholars argue that the sword is evidence of an association between Chinese and Olmec symbolism and mythology, a topic of debate that has perplexed researchers for over a century. Are there similarities between ancient Chinese culture and the Olmecs? Unfortunately, there is little follow-up to the reports announcing the sword's discovery, leaving the world to wonder if it's a genuine artifact, and if so, how did it end up by a remote stream in the United States? The question remains of who actually came to the Americas from a faraway land first. Was it the Chinese? Was it the Vikings? Perhaps others? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. New extinct hominid species. The history of humans and our closest genetic relatives is confusing at best, and researchers are a far cry from fully disentangling theory from fact. But as they continue to dig for new information, both literally and figuratively, experts are slowly chipping away at our mysterious shared past. In 2013, volunteers excavated a treasure trove of hominid bones from deep within a cave near Johannesburg, South Africa. During their first dig alone, they recovered over 1,400 fossilized hominid bone fragments and 140 teeth. The extensive cache, which constitutes the single richest fossil deposit of its kind throughout Africa, is a rarity among the typical slim pickings of the early human fossil record. Even more impressively, the remains represent a previously unidentified extinct species from the Homo genus. Dubbed Homo naledi, the prehistoric primate had a small brain and an ape-like torso and shoulders, as well as numerous human-like features. The bones are somewhere between 236,000 and 335,000 years old, meaning the species may have lived alongside early modern humans. What's clear is that H. naledi and Homo sapiens, aka humans, are related. But the nagging question is how the two are related, as experts have not yet situated the newly discovered species on the hominid family tree. The most baffling aspect of the discovery stems from the realization that the H. naledi bones appear to have been deliberately left in the cave, a behavior that has not been observed in other, equally primitive hominids. This is just one of many examples of how scientists are continuously reworking the narrative of our collective past, showing that we still have a lot to learn about our beginnings. New Dead Sea Scroll text. Earlier this year, researchers realized that a series of Dead Sea Scroll manuscript fragments, previously thought to be blank, actually contain text. The discovery is remarkable, especially considering the amount of forgeries that have been identified over the years. Unlike the phony examples, these fragments were found in the Qumran caves during official excavations and were also never bought or sold on the antiquities market. The Jordanian government gifted the seemingly blank bits and pieces, which were discovered during the 1950s, to University of Leeds leather expert Ronald Reed, who examined their physical and chemical components and put them into storage. After the Reed collection was donated to the University of Manchester in 1997, Professor Joan Taylor noticed that one of the fragments appeared to contain a letter. Using spectral imaging, she photographed the fronts and backs of 51 pieces, all which appeared blank at first glance. 4 were found to contain Hebrew and Aramaic text, a discovery that surprised even Taylor herself, who said, frankly, since all these fragments were supposed to be blank and had even been cut into for leather studies, I also thought I might be imagining things. The lettering, written in carbon-based ink, is largely a mystery due to the shredded nature of the pieces, although the word Shabbat, or Sabbath, was identified on a fragment containing 15 or 16 characters. It may be associated with the Book of Ezekiel, according to the Network for the Study of Dispersed Qumran Cave Artifacts and Archival Sources. Experts are further exploring the fragments in an attempt to learn more about their content, kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. Who built the Great Pyramids? A cluster of 4,000-year-old burials near the Giza pyramids, outside modern-day Cairo, suggests that the iconic structures were not built by slaves, as popular legend holds, but instead by paid laborers. The mud brick tombs, located 9 feet underground, contained the well-preserved remains of around a dozen people who likely helped build the ancient monuments. They were buried with jars of beer and bread for use in the afterlife. The graves were discovered near other pyramid builders' burials, which were first discovered in 1990, thanks to a vigilant tourist. These discoveries provide researchers with valuable insight into the lifestyle of the individuals who constructed the pyramids of Giza. They also show, according to Zahi Hawass, Egypt's chief archaeologist, that pyramid builders were paid for their work and that they were not forced to do it. In other words, they were employees rather than slaves. The builders were poor, and their skeletons bear obvious signs of arthritis and other health problems, but they were also respected for their labor. They worked in 3-month rotations and regularly ate meat, with the estimated workforce of 10,000 laborers at any given time consuming around 21 cattle and 23 sheep daily. This was quite the expense, but it was to keep the workers healthy and strong, while many other people of the day were forced vegetarians since meat was eaten rarely because it was expensive. The workers who died during construction were buried near the pyramids, which were considered sacred property of the pharaohs. Although the tombs contain no gold or other valuables, their proximity to the pyramids speaks to their importance. No way would they have been buried so honorably if they were slaves, Hawass told The Guardian. The misconception that pyramid builders were slaves spread in numerous ways, perhaps starting with statements in the Book of Exodus about Egyptians enslaving Israelites. Former Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin's claim in 1977 that Jews built the pyramids added to the myth, which perpetuated from there, thanks largely to Hollywood. Inca child sacrifice. Researchers have long known that human sacrifice was a big part of the Inca culture, but their understanding of the methods involved is incomplete. The 1999 discovery of 3 remarkably preserved mummified children near the Andean summit of Volcán Yuyayaco in modern-day Argentina helped to bring experts one step closer to understanding some of the circumstances under which the ancient civilization sacrificed people. The mummies, which consist of the remains of a 13-year-old female nicknamed the Yuyayaco Maiden and a boy and girl each between 4 and 5 years old, were found at nearly 22,110 feet above sea level. The altitude's frigid temperatures kept the deceased in pristine condition for a remarkably long time, around 500 years. A series of studies, including a DNA analysis and an examination of the maiden's hair, revealed that her life changed dramatically during her last year of life, indicating that she was specifically selected for sacrifice. Throughout that time, she consumed drastically increasing amounts of coca and alcohol. The teen also ate foods typically enjoyed by elites, such as maize and meat. During her final weeks of life, the maiden drank a lot of alcohol. It's unknown whether she ingested it willingly or was forced to consume it, but this activity marked her last stages of preparation for sacrifice. Based on the relaxed position she was found in over a half-century after her death, researchers believe that the combination of substances in the maiden's body made her more docile, or perhaps even rendered her unconscious on the day she was offered to the gods. The other children also had coca and alcohol in their systems when they died. The trio who were killed in a sacrificial ritual called capacocha bore no signs of violence, unlike other known evidence of Inca child sacrifices, some of which bear signs of skull trauma. They may have been more cooperative than most, or they may have been spared from being bludgeoned for some other reason, and simply left to pass away peacefully on the mountain. The Great Library of Alexandria. The burning of the Great Library at Alexandria in northern Egypt is one of history's best-known travesties. Founded in 283 BC, it was once the ancient world's largest library, housing over 100 full-time scholars and containing texts by renowned thinkers and writers such as Homer, Plato, and Socrates. Perhaps even more remarkably, the library did not admit visitors based on wealth. Rather, it was open to anyone who proved themselves to be a worthy scholar. According to legend, the Great Library at Alexandria was tragically burned to the ground at some point in history. But evidence suggests that the decline of the library and its hundreds of thousands of valuable manuscripts were much more gradual, and that budget shortfalls played a major role in their downfall. The first alleged fire at the Alexandria Library occurred around 40 AD, when Julius Caesar and his invading forces set it on fire, marking the first in a series of destructive battles and blazes over the following centuries. Government spending cuts and other policy changes helped immensely with tipping the Great Library at Alexandria into non-existence. When Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius revoked resident scholars' pay and banned foreign scholars from visiting, he effectively closed the library down, leaving its precious contents neglected and forgotten. Religious riots further damaged the facility in 391 and 415 AD, and the library met its final end in the year 640, when it was captured by Arab forces, who reportedly gathered the remaining manuscripts and used them as fuel for thousands of bathhouses. Cat domestication. People seem to either love or hate cats, and their domestication is a little understood phenomenon. Cats are very independent, but have been with us humans for thousands of years. A 2013 study traces the first known instance of a mutual relationship between humans and cats back to Chuanhukun, an ancient agricultural settlement in China. Our data suggests that cats were attracted to ancient farming villages by small animals, such as rodents that were living on the grain that the farmers grew, ate, and stored, explained study co-author Fiona Marshall. Results of this study show that the village of Chuanhukun was a source of food for the cats 5,300 years ago, and the relationship between humans and cats was commensal, or advantageous for the cats. The relationship was arguably mutually beneficial, as the findings revealed that the cats at Chuanhukun killed pesky rodents that caused problems for farmers. Evidence suggests that over time, humans and cats became closer. For example, the remains of an elderly feline show that the animal was well cared for, and another cat bore evidence of eating millet, indicating that someone possibly fed the animal or that they scavenged, but either way, the cat spent considerable time near people. These types of interactions do not mean that cats were domesticated, but that they began to cohabitate peacefully with us and benefit from us, eventually leading to their domestication. But scientists are admittedly still trying to get to the bottom of the origins of domestic cats, which are believed to have descended from African wildcats as far back as 8000 BC. Some scholars believe people may have kept felines as pets as early as 9,500 years ago, during the Neolithic period. But this is all speculative. The earliest known reliable evidence of cat domestication traces back to 4,000 years ago in ancient Egypt. Researchers seem to think that this history goes back further, but are still working to find the missing pieces to the puzzle. As you know, cats are more elusive than dogs. Dazu Rock carvings. The Dazu area in Chongqing, China is famous for its many incredibly detailed rock carvings. Dating back from the 9th to the 13th centuries, they are known for their aesthetic quality and variety of scenes depicting everyday life for people during this time period. Incredibly, they are very well preserved, with few broken areas and coloring that still remains. There are 102 cliffside sculptures and rock carvings in the county, and some of them are enormous. Some of the most mysterious are two statues with very strange faces. It turns out that they are mythical figures dressed as generals, clairvoyance, and clairaudience. In early 2017, Li Xiaoqiang, head researcher, confirmed that two 6-foot-tall statues represent the abilities to send and receive psychic messages and correspondence to and from spirits. The clairvoyance statue depicts a character who can see thousands of miles away, represented with large eyes and ribbons floating from his head. Clairaudience can hear thousands of miles away. The statues, which also represent two mythological generals of the Jade Emperor, date back to 1147, during the Southern Song dynasty. Both are scantily clad, showing off their toned physiques, while each displays characteristics exemplifying his strongest qualities. The characters each hold an unidentified object. In the case of clairvoyance, people seem to believe that the item in question is an ancient telescope, while many theorize that clairaudience possesses either a snake or a telephone receiver that he uses to hear his far-flung audience. Researchers are hesitant to officially identify the items because they admittedly aren't sure what the objects are. While both characters have existed for quite some time, statues of them are rare, Lee told China Daily. Experts will continue studying the pair in hopes of learning more about them and their role in China's past. Lost Monastery. While excavating King's Square in the city of Gloucester, England, as part of its redevelopment, archaeologists recently discovered the location of a long-lost 13th century Carmelite friary. The team, headed by Gloucester City Council and Cotswold Archaeology, found the facility's remains amongst the wreckage of a demolished parking garage, bringing an end to an age-old mystery regarding where the White Friars had their headquarters. They were members of the Order of Carmelites, but all information of their location there had been lost. The historical record contained evidence that the establishment was somewhere in the area, but for years its exact location eluded historians and other experts. So far, experts have uncovered the remnants of at least 4 large buildings that were either made from stone or with stone footings, a medieval drain, and the remains of tiled and mortared floors. For around 300 years, White Friars played an active part in Gloucester and produced some notable friars, city archaeologist Andrew Armstrong told Express. Seeing and documenting this site will serve to underline and recognize the place of friary in the city's history. Friars were similar to monks when it came to their dedication to prayer and learning, but unlike monks, friars actively engaged with the outside world and performed community service. Among the most noteworthy members of the Order of Carmelites was Nicholas Cantelo, or Cantilupe, a historian and master of theology of noble background who lived during the 15th century. Ancient Tablet. Experts recently dated a coarse cylindrical stone artifact containing a Greek inscription all the way back to 165 BC, before Jesus was born. The object, which archaeologists discovered in March in the Duhok region of Iraq, contains Hellenistic script, connecting it to the historical period following Alexander the Great's death in 323 BC. Researchers who translated the inscription to Kurdish discovered that it mentions Demetrius, a 2nd century BC king of Macedon who ruled over the region. Many ancient artifacts of seemingly Greek origins have been discovered throughout Asia and the Middle East, but to Duhok Museum director Hassan Ahmed, who announced the fascinating find, as well as other experts, the tablet's discovery is major, not only for its historical value, but because it potentially opens up possibilities for further excavations in the Kurdistan region. Just days before Ahmed released a statement about the Hellenistic tablet, the Kurdistan Region Ministry of Municipalities and Tourism announced the discovery of multiple archaeological sites in Erbil province. Tablet linked to Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark from the Book of Genesis tells of a devout man who survived apocalyptic worldwide flooding by building a wooden boat called an ark at God's instruction. Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, and their sons' wives were the only humans to survive the flood, their lives spared thanks to their loyalty to God in a corrupted and evil world. When the flood was over, the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. Evidence of the ark is very faint, which isn't a problem for those who don't believe the story in the first place, but many do, including plenty of archaeologists, some who theorize that Ararat is a dormant volcano in Turkey. One of them is Tom Meyer, a Bible studies professor at Shasta Bible College in California. Meyer believes there are numerous clues indicating that Noah's Ark is a factual story and which could help find the vessel's remains. He explained his views in an interview with Express Media, first pointing out that there are numerous historical accounts of catastrophic flooding that at least resemble the biblical story of the flood Noah and his family endured, with the secular versions landing the ark in various places. Meyer further stated, a recent cracking of an ancient puzzle by Irving Finkel, the assistant keeper of ancient Mesopotamian languages at the British Museum, corroborates the Bible's record of the ark landing on Mount Ararat. The ancient puzzle in question is the Simmons Ark tablet, a 3,700-year-old Babylonian cuneiform tablet that describes the ancient Babylonian story of the flood. It's incredibly similar to the story of Noah's Ark, despite allegedly being about a different event. Within its 60 lines of cuneiform, Dr. Irving found text indicating where the Babylonians thought the ark was, which he claims refers to the region of eastern Turkey where Mount Ararat is located. Religion can be a sensitive topic when it comes to archaeology, as this example proves. While some archaeologists write off Dr. Irving's claims as scientifically unsupported poppycock, others find them completely credible, despite a conspicuous lack of physical evidence. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We have lots of videos coming up. Turfan balls. A recent study describes the discovery of 3 leather balls in the prehistoric Yanghai Cemetery in northwestern China, serving as the oldest known evidence of ball games in Eurasia. The trio of artifacts were radiocarbon dated to sometime between 1189 and 911 BC, predating other known evidence of ball games by several centuries. This makes these balls about 500 years older than the previous known ancient balls and depictions of ball games in Eurasia, said study author and archaeologist Dr. Patrick Wortman. 2 of the balls were found in tombs possibly belonging to horse riders, and it is believed that the artifacts date back to a time when horseback riding first spread throughout the region. For the team, identifying the balls was only half the battle. They admittedly still haven't figured out which ball game the objects were used for, although, in their words, their use in team and goal sport is likely, hockey perhaps. But this suspicion cannot be confirmed, especially since no accessories of the same age, such as sticks, have been found. Ritual bath. During a routine excavation in anticipation of road construction in Israel's Lower Galilee region, workers and volunteers under the supervision of the Israeli Antiquities Authority, or IAA, found a 2,000-year-old mikvah, or ritual bath. In Judaism, mikvahs are used for ritualistic purification purposes. The recently discovered 57-ton bath offers new insight into Jewish life in Roman-ruled Palestine during the Second Temple period, which lasted from 597 BC to 70 AD. It was previously unknown that the residents of the ancient farmstead where the mikvah was found, or in Galilee in general, were Jewish. Additionally, as IAA archaeologist Dr. Abd El-Ghani Ibrahim and Dr. Walid Atrash pointed out, the discovery shows that the people who lived there were devoted to maintaining a traditional religious lifestyle and staying pure. It was considered that the Jews in the Roman period didn't live in farms outside the villages or towns, the experts explained. Around 1,700 years ago, a massive earthquake destroyed the farm, and 300 years later, it was abandoned for good. A crowdfunding campaign paid for the careful removal of the mikvah from the bedrock and its relocation next to a modern mikvah in Kibbutz Hanaton. Iron Age massacre. Between the 15th century BC and the 3rd century BC, the town of La Joya in what is now northern Spain was bustling. The prehistoric settlement reached a peak population of around 1,500 residents, but at some point, it ceased to exist completely. La Joya was rediscovered in 1935 and partially excavated between 1973 and 1990. During that time, archaeologists discovered the burned skeletons of at least 13 people in the streets and inside buildings. This year, a team of researchers and archaeologists performed the first detailed analysis of the human remains. Their findings, detailed in the journal Antiquity, indicate that the attackers targeted their victims when they least expected it. There were no weapons near the individuals, who the researchers believe were viciously murdered while unarmed at a public event. Moreover, the invaders did not appear to take any goods, implying that they were politically rather than economically motivated. Included among the remains are a beheaded adult male, bones containing stab marks, and a teenage girl with her arm cut off. The brutality predates the Roman conquest of the region, leading researchers to believe that the carnage may have occurred between 2 Iberian rivals. Based on the condition La Joya was left in, including the lack of proper burials, it's likely that any survivors picked up and moved elsewhere. Animals buried alive. Human and animal sacrifices were customary among certain ancient Mesoamerican civilizations, including the Inca. When they wanted to appease the gods, the Inca often sacrificed llamas, a prized asset that provided the civilization with food and clothing. So when archaeologists recently found the well-preserved remains of 5 llamas at a Peruvian site called Tambo Viejo, the discovery was exciting, but not necessarily surprising, at least not at first. But the remains are teaching experts more about the Incas' sacrificial customs. Based on radiocarbon dating, the animals were buried between 1432 and 1459, before the arrival of Spanish conquistadores. Nearby were large ovens and evidence of feasts, indicating that the sacrifices happened during celebrations. Dr. Lido Valdez from the University of Calgary explained the offerings likely were part of much larger feasts and gatherings sponsored by the state. The state befriended the local people with food and drink, cementing political alliances, whilst placing offerings allowed the Inca to claim the land as theirs. In other words, these practices were meant to appease recently conquered societies. As part of the ritual, the Inca decorated the llamas with jewelry and likely buried them alive, as evidenced by their feet being tied together, a measure that would have prevented them from moving around too much during the process. Dr. Valdez admitted that he had no way to prove that the llamas were buried alive, but he nevertheless thinks that that's what happened. Inca used to sacrifice children, and it is said some of the children were buried alive, he told the New Scientist. If they did that with children, I'm sure they would have done the same thing with llamas. 2,400-year-old mask. In September of this year, the Turkish state-run news company Anadolu Agency reported the discovery of a 2,400-year-old terracotta mask depicting the ancient Greek god Dionysus in the Acropolis of the ancient city of Deucalion. Archaeologist Kan Iren, who led the team that made the exciting find, told the press that the artifact may have been a votive mask, adding that it was likely used during winemaking rituals. According to legend, wearing a mask depicting Dionysus, the god of carnivals and masquerades, freed someone from hidden regrets and desires. Excavations at Deucalion are 32 years old, and this is the first time that we have unearthed a mask which is nearly intact, Iren said, conveying the remarkable nature of the discovery. The mask likely dates back to the end of the 4th century BC and is one of numerous intriguing artifacts that have been excavated at Deucalion, a historically multicultural city that served as an administrative center for the Persian Empire before Hellenistic influence began taking over in 334 BC. Losapos sweat bath. Sweat baths, also called sweat lodges, were a common part of Mesoamerican cultures, who used them for both spiritual and health-related purposes. This year, scientists working at the Xultun archaeological site in Guatemala unearthed numerous bones and tools at what's called Losapos sweat bath. The study, led by archaeologists from the Smithsonian Tropical Institute and Boston University, claims that the Maya viewed sweat baths as embodiments of relatives, ancestors, and supernatural beings. Dating back to sometime between 250 and 550 AD, during the early Classic period, the Losapos sweat bath is ornately decorated, bearing the image of a squatting female deity with legs featuring iguanas and cane toads. No other structure in Mesoamerica, sweat bath or otherwise, looks like this building, said study co-author and STRI archaeologist Ashley Sharp. It would seem that when someone enters the front of the structure, they are entering the amphibian goddess who personified the sweat bath. The team believes that the sweat bath was used for roughly 300 years before a deceased adult was buried there around 600 AD. Another 3 centuries later, the person's remains were removed and replaced with the remains of a child and various animals, including a puppy, birds, toads, and iguanas. The combination of remains was likely a dedication to the sweat bath as a place of birth and creation, and reflective of a population that was trying to ensure its survival by appeasing the goddess. Feline attire. Of all the things you might expect to find in a tomb, this isn't one of them. Scientists were excavating a tomb of a nobleman in Peru when they came across ancient cat claws. Located in the famous archaeological site of Huaca de la Luna, or Temple of the Moon, in northern Peru, the area is home to the ancient Moche culture. While the excavation has been going on for about 20 years, there are still many surprises to be found. The feline claws date back to around 1,500 years ago and were found near the elite man's skeleton. Archaeologists aren't quite sure how they are worn, but they could have been part of a costume used in rituals. The 30-year-old nobleman who owned the metal cat claw accessories likely wore them for ceremonial combat as part of a ritual that involved people dressing up like animals. The loser in these rituals was sacrificed, while the winner collected the garments as a symbol of their victory. Big cats played a huge part in the Moche culture and are often depicted on murals, painted on vessels, and carved in figurines. Alongside the metal-lined claws were a copper scepter with the head of a feline, a mask, and earrings representing the tomb occupants' wealth, as well as ceramic pots and feline fangs. There are also a lot of copper and brass artifacts. Huaca de la Luna was located in the capital city of the Moche Empire, which thrived between 100 and 800 AD. It's believed that human sacrifice played a major role in the Moche's culture and customs, and that it was sometimes a long, drawn-out process, with some victims being kept alive for weeks while their blood was drained from their body. This culture was no joke, and scientists still don't know what happened to them. Perhaps it was earthquakes, drought, and catastrophic flooding, but so far the incredible pyramids and artifacts left behind show us just how powerful they once were. Biggest terrestrial animal of all time. In Argentina in 1987, a farmer stumbled across what he thought was a large chunk of petrified wood the size of a person. It turned out to be a single vertebra belonging to a new species of dinosaur, the Argentinosaurus. No complete skeleton has been found, but based on other fossil finds, this dinosaur ranged from about 121 to 131 feet long and weighed about 99 to 110 tons. It lived during the Cretaceous period, between 100 million and 93 million years ago. But evidence of even bigger dinosaurs has turned up in recent years. In 2013, a shepherd in Argentina spotted what looked like a bone protruding from the ground. Local paleontologists were called in, and they spent 2 weeks unearthing what turned out to be an 8-foot-long femur, the largest ever discovered. The remains belong to a much larger titanosaur than Argentinosaurus. This newly discovered species was called Patagotitan majorum. Patago because it was found in Patagonia, Argentina, and Titan because of its large size. It likely measured around 130 feet from head to tail and weighed about 77 tons. Around 84 pieces of fossil were found in the same place, helping scientists to get a complete picture of what the dinosaur may have looked like. The American Museum of Natural History used these pieces to make a model of the skeleton, measuring 122 feet long. Dr. Diego Pol, who helped discover the dinosaur, explained that Patagotitan majorum was close to the maximal limit for terrestrial animals, and that he and his colleagues are stumped as to how 100 million years ago this subgroup of titanosaur got so huge. Something in the environment must have helped them get so large, but right now, nobody knows why. Based on the evidence we have, it looks like Patagotitan majorum may have been the world's largest terrestrial animal of all time. But you know how it goes. Our knowledge of dinosaurs is always changing. Monteverde. Archaeologists unearthed the oldest confirmed remnants of a human presence in South America during the 1970s at the Monteverde archaeological site in Chile, near the continent's southern tip. There, they found wads of chewed-up seaweed, which people likely used for medicinal reasons, food scraps, a child's footprint, and evidence of huts dating back 14,000 years. Subsequent excavations yielded signs that people may have arrived at Monteverde as early as 19,000 years ago, but these claims remain controversial and unproven. Items including a communal residence, food remains, clay-fired pits, tools, butchered animal parts, spun grass rope, wooden lances, and human feces certainly prove the prehistoric presence of humans in the area, but exactly how early they first appeared remains disputed. The people who lived at Monteverde gathered over 60 edible plant species and hunted now extinct creatures, including paleocamelids, an ancestor of llamas and alpacas, and elephant-like gomphotheres. Strangely, however, archaeologists did not find any Clovis points at the site, disproving the theory that the Clovis people, who manufactured these stone tools, were the first to arrive in the Americas. Numerous pre-Clovis sites have been discovered since then, including 10 in North America and 2 in South America. Scientists don't know enough about the Monteverde people to say with any confidence who they were and how widespread their population was. And while they hope to get to the bottom of the puzzle, there is no guarantee that they ever will. Sanchinbajo. Sanchinbajo is an archaeological site situated on the northwestern coast of Peru that is believed to have served as the capital of a pre-Incan culture between 1800 and 1900 BC. The ruins of a circular plaza hidden underneath other architecture is one of the oldest structures ever found in the Americas. It's part of the Sechin complex, a vast site spanning several kilometers in diameter, and which archaeologists believe represents one large, continuous settlement. Archaeological investigations of the Sechin complex began in the 1930s, starting with Julio Tello, also known as the father of Peruvian archaeology. But researchers only started studying Sanchinbajo as recently as 2000. The settlement was centered around a 59-foot-high mound, and evidence yielded from excavations suggests that the site was used for various reasons over an extended time period. On a temple wall nearby, archaeologists found a prehistoric relief frieze, estimated to be between 3,600 and 3,800 years old. The artwork, made from clay mortar, depicts mythological or religious items and symbols. The circular stone plaza suggests that Sanchinbajo may date back even further, perhaps as early as 3,500 BC. Prior to this discovery, archaeologists considered the citadel of Caral to be one of the oldest in the Western Hemisphere at about 5,000 years old. This goes back even further. Vilcabamba. Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro arrived in northern Peru in 1531 and immediately began claiming territory on behalf of both himself and Spain. But the Inca Empire was already there when he arrived with his 180 men and 30 horses, and although Pizarro eventually seized control over the civilization, it did not back down without a fight. In 1536, the Incas rebelled and retreated deep into the jungle of the Peruvian Andes. The empire launched attacks against the Spanish from Vilcabamba, a secret rebel base that ultimately served as the society's last stronghold. Nestled in a remote mountainous region, Vilcabamba was the capital of several cities throughout the region that the Inca rebels established. 4 different leaders ruled over Vilcabamba until it fell to the conquistadores in 1572, and the Incas set it ablaze and abandoned it. The Spanish captured and executed the ruler, Tupac Amaru I, effectively ending the Inca Empire. Over time, nature reclaimed the city and it was largely forgotten. Archaeologists spent over a century trying to find Vilcabamba, which now also goes by the name Espiritu Pampa. It was finally cleared and excavated in recent decades after Vincent Lee, an architect and explorer, mapped it out during the 1980s. The jungle foliage at the site was so thick one could hardly see one building from the next, in Lee's words. The ruins consist of a huge hall with 26 doorways, a palace compound, and a series of streets, rooms, and stairways. Due to its remoteness and inaccessibility, the site was never looted or disturbed prior to its rediscovery, making the ruins extremely valuable for gaining archaeological insight into what went on there. Disproportionate extinction. The Great American Biotic Interchange, or GABI, occurred millions of years ago with the emergence of the Panama Isthmus, which connected North and South America, resulting in the large-scale migration of mammals from north to south, but not so much the other way around. Why this movement was so one-sided has long puzzled paleontologists and other experts, some of whom recently collaborated to analyze ancient fossil data from the 2 continents. Why did animals choose to move south instead of north? Their findings show that South American mammals disproportionately went extinct during the GABI, resulting in decreased diversity and less available candidates for northward migration. This faunal exchange can be seen as a natural experiment. 2 continents, each with its own kind of animals, were connected by a narrow land bridge, allowing massive migrations in both directions, said lead study author and Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute fellow Juan Carrillo. The effects of this exchange can still be seen today. These statistics speak for themselves, with nearly half of modern South American mammals descending from their North American neighbors, and only 10% of North American mammals coming from the south. But why did so many more South American mammals go extinct in the first place? Researchers aren't sure, but they have proposed several possible causes, including habitat changes and increased competition and predation that came with the GABI. It appears that the North American carnivores who emigrated to South America were more efficient predators, who possibly had specialized teeth and larger brains. Learning about past instances of biodiversity disruptions could potentially help scientists foresee the long-term consequences of the contemporary movement of species. The San Jose. The Spanish galleon the San Jose was loaded with treasure when it departed from Panama. Every year, the ship would leave South America, packed to the brim with precious metals and gems from the colonies, including Peru and Colombia, and set sail to Spain under guard by a fleet of warships. In 1708, its departure was delayed by the War of Spanish Succession, but the fleet commander decided to set sail anyway. Right off the coast of Colombia, it was attacked by the British and went up in flames, sinking and taking almost $20 billion worth of treasure down with it. For hundreds of years, the ship lay lost off the coast at the bottom of the ocean floor. But in 2015, the Colombian government announced that the ship had been found. Its location has been kept a secret, since it is known as the Holy Grail of shipwrecks, and many people have an interest in finding the treasure. The problem now is that everyone wants a piece, and the treasure is stuck in a legal battle. Spain, Colombia, the US, and the private companies involved all want a piece. There are an estimated 1,000 ships sunk off the coast of Colombia, but archaeologists and historians want to get their hands on the artifacts brought up from the San Jose to share what it contains with the world. Ancient hallucinogens. A 2019 archaeological study details the discovery of what's thought to be the oldest known evidence of human consumption of ayahuasca, a plant-based drug from the Amazon basin that produces strong hallucinations. The finding came in the form of a pouch made from 3 sewn-together fox snouts, which contained what appeared to be traces of the psychoactive substance. Archaeologists happened upon the suspected stash in what is now southwestern Bolivia, and they believe it may date back as far as 1,000 years. The study was published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America. More specifically, the pouch was found in a rock shelter called Cueva del Chileno, or Cave of the Chileno, which contains evidence of human habitation dating back at least 4,000 years, and once served as a tomb. Over the years, looters ransacked the site, removing the human bodies and anything else that they suspected was valuable. Thankfully, they left behind some important artifacts that they wrote off as unimportant, including beads, braided human hair, and the pouch, which anthropologist and study author José Capriles initially mistook for a leather shoe when he discovered it in 2010. Capriles and his team believe that the pouch belonged to a shaman, and they tested its contents to determine exactly what was in it, besides dried plant remains. The results turned up traces of numerous mind-altering substances, including bufotenine, BZE, cocaine, DMT, psilocin, a chemical component of shrooms, and more that I can't pronounce. Interestingly, the pouch contained evidence of plants that are not native to Bolivia, suggesting that its owner was well-traveled or well-connected, as Aaron Blakemore reported in National Geographic. In fact, some of the contents derive from plants from hundreds of miles away. This person was moving very large distances or had access to people who were, said Capriles. As psychedelic drug use experiences a noticeable uptick in the US and South America, the reasons for indulging in these substances have changed, as ethnopharmacologist Dennis McKenna explained. In the past, hallucinogens were largely used for ritualistic and spiritual reasons. Today, many people turn to these drugs for mental health benefits and relief from mood disorders. In McKenna's words, it's used very differently these days, not necessarily a worse way, but a different way. Huge cat geoglyph. While performing maintenance at the world-famous Nazca Lines in southern Peru, archaeologists discovered the faded image of a cat etched into a hillside. The carving marks the latest discovery among the massive depictions of plants, animals, and other objects that have been found among the Nazca Lines. It dates back to sometime between 200 BC and 100 BC and measures roughly 120 feet across. Ever since the Nazca Lines were first discovered in 1927, experts have periodically turned up more, with the recently identified cat likely being older than any of the other known geoglyphs. It's quite striking that we're still finding new figures, but we also know that there are more to be found. Johnny Isla, Peru's chief archaeologist for the Nazca Lines, said in an interview with the Spanish news agency EFE. Considering that Japanese researchers found over 140 new geoglyphs at the site last year, it's certainly safe to say that there's likely more where that came from. From the sounds of things, the recent feline discovery nearly went undetected. In a statement, Peru's cultural ministry said that the figure was barely visible and was about to disappear because it is situated on quite a steep slope that's prone to the effects of natural erosion. The agency imposes a strict no trespassing rule at the Nazca Lines, where even a footprint could damage the fragile etchings. While researchers theorize that the images served as travel markers, the truth is that they're not entirely sure what their purpose was. Now they're scrambling to preserve the Nazca Lines before they become lost to history. Las Jamas Sacrifice. In 2018, archaeologists working in northern Peru announced the 2011 discovery of what could be the world's largest single example of child sacrifice. The 140 children at the site, called Las Llamas, were between 9 and 14 years old when they were killed and buried in a ceremony around 550 years ago. On the same day, around 200 young llamas were also sacrificed. The Chimu Empire sacrificed the children at a time when El Niño was causing severe flooding along the Peruvian coast. coastline. They buried them facing the sea, and the llamas facing the Andes to the east. Archaeologist and excavation leader Gabriel Prieto told The Guardian they were possibly offering the gods the most important thing they had as a society, and the most important thing is children because they represent the future. Llamas were also very important because these people had no other beasts of burden. They were a fundamental part of the economy. The site offers concrete evidence that children were sacrificed en masse in ancient Peru, according to Jeffrey Quilter, director of Harvard University's Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology. While it's known that child sacrifice occurred throughout parts of the ancient world, such a large burial of youths is seldom heard of or documented. Quilter and his team are working to analyze the children's DNA to see if they were related and exactly where they came from within the Chimu Empire. Water dragons. A fisherman in the river Irtysh in Kazakhstan got quite the surprise when he caught bizarre monsters that looked like mythical underwater dragons. In reality, they were pike, which are long carnivorous fish with a mouthful of very sharp teeth. These fish are pretty scary anyway, but in this case, they had horns. One weighing 26 pounds had 2 horns, and the smaller one weighing 15 pounds had 4 horns sticking out of its head. What did he decide to do with the mutant water dragons? Eat them and save their heads as proof in his garage. The biggest pike ever caught was in Germany in 1986, when angler Lothar Lewis caught a pike that weighed 57 pounds, but they did not have horns. So what caused the pike to look the way they did? Perhaps it was a genetic mutation of some sort, or pollution from the nearby mine. Or maybe underwater dragons are real. Record-breaking lionfish. In October of this year, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission released a statement announcing a new record for the longest lionfish captured in the Gulf of Mexico. A fisherman named Donald C. Vautrinot was spearfishing for red snapper off the Destin coast and decided to also catch a few lionfish. When he went back into the water, he says, "I saw a monster lionfish and immediately knew I wanted to measure it," Vautrinot told Fox 13. "I got really excited because I knew the Gulf record was around 18 inches, but I didn't know exactly and we didn't have a cell signal to check it out there." He and his friends thought it was a pretty big deal, so once they reached the shore in Okaloosa County, they took the specimen in to be officially measured. Their suspicions proved correct, and Vautrinot was named the state's new record holder for the longest lionfish captured in the Gulf of Mexico. The fish, which measured 18.19 inches, defeats the previous record holder by a narrow margin of just 0.12 inches. In 2018, diver Timothy Blasco set the record for the heaviest lionfish ever caught in the Atlantic Ocean when he collected a 3.1-pound specimen off the Florida Keys. This may not seem large, but for a lionfish, it's more or less gigantic. Lionfish are native to the Indo-Pacific and should not be in the Atlantic Ocean, Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean Sea, or the Mediterranean Sea, but they have become an invasive species, eating everything in sight. Because they threaten the region's endemic wildlife, conservation authorities encourage people to hunt them and hopefully even put them on the menu at restaurants. The rapidly reproducing species, which was first spotted in the Atlantic off Dania Beach, Florida in 1985, has no known predators in this particular habitat other than humans, and feeds on native creatures. It's unknown how lionfish reached the Atlantic, but experts speculate that members of the invasive species were released into the ocean from people who just didn't want them in their aquariums anymore. But first, want to give a big shout out to Battleborn and big hello to your son, and Saira Tan for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and let me know if you've ever gone fishing and caught something fun in the comments below. Crabzilla. Weighing up to 42 pounds and with a leg span measuring as much as 12.1 feet from claw to claw, the Japanese spider crab is the world's largest arthropod. As its name implies, the species is found near Japan, primarily off the southern coast of Honshu. These deep dwellers typically live between 160 and 1,970 feet beneath the water's surface. It also gets its name because it looks like a giant spider. One gigantic Japanese spider crab, nicknamed Crabzilla, made headlines in 2010 in anticipation of its debut at the Sea Life Center in The Hague, Netherlands. Crabzilla, who weighs over 30 pounds and whose leg span measures over 12 feet, was caught in the Pacific Ocean in 2009. The following year, he became the largest member of his species ever exhibited in Europe, and one of the biggest ever captured, period. Legend holds that Japanese spider crabs feasted on the corpses of drowned sailors. This is possible since they are scavengers, and one glimpse at Crabzilla is enough to understand how these opportunists can and will eat pretty much anything they come across. Crabzilla's front limbs are his feeding arms, each over 5 feet long and ending in sizable claws, explained Graham Burrows, curator of the National Sea Life Center in Birmingham, England. But sometimes, these creatures turn from predator to prey, as Burrows further pointed out, stating they are a Japanese delicacy and are usually salted and steamed, but eating them in the spring is banned because that is when they lay their eggs. Fun fact, they like to cover themselves with other critters for camouflage. NFL player versus grouper. It's not every day that a 320-pound NFL player struggles against a fish. But that's precisely what happened earlier this year, when Jacksonville Jaguars offensive tackle Jawan Taylor reeled in a 400-pound grouper during a fishing trip off the Brevard County, Florida coast. The ordeal, which Taylor likened to pulling up a bus, was captured on video, which subsequently went viral. Taylor's catch was huge, and it wasn't even the largest grouper ever caught. That title goes to a 680-pound Goliath grouper captured on May 20th, 1961, off Fernandina Beach, Florida, by a fisherman named Lynn Joyner, who reeled in the gargantuan creature using a Spanish mackerel as bait, in case you want to try it next time you go fishing. The area was once well known for its massive grouper population, but the Goliath grouper is considered endangered today. Its dwindling numbers prompted lawmakers to establish legislation in 1990 protecting the species in the U.S. and the Caribbean. Tenacious Tuna. While out on his first fishing trip in his new boat earlier this year, 17-year-old Wyatt Morse of Auburn, Maine, and 2 of his friends spent 7.5 hours reeling in a 9-foot-long, 750-pound bluefin tuna. The fish took the bait roughly 30 miles offshore on the morning of July 1st and proceeded to haul the vessel another 10 miles throughout the day as the teens attempted to exhaust the creature into submission. Morse had just laid down for a nap when his buddies Martin Scanlan and Griffin Buckwalter alerted him to the tuna's presence. Throughout the hours-long ordeal, the young men made sure to capture video footage of their struggle against the massive fish. At one point, Morse even worried that the fish was undefeatable. "It's rare to catch these big fish. Their power is crazy," he told the Bangor Daily News. "We had the motor up and the fish was pulling a 24-foot vessel sideways at 2 miles per hour. That's a strong fish." The boys finally captured the tuna with the help of Scanlan's father, who reported to the scene with a boat large enough to haul it aboard. They took their catch to Portland, where they sold it for $2,000. While the teens' victory against the massive fish is impressive in its own right, the largest bluefin tuna ever captured was much larger, weighing 1,496 pounds. It was caught off the coast of Nova Scotia in 1979. Marlins. In July of this year, a lady angler named Ginger Myers reeled in an 851.9-pound Atlantic blue marlin, potentially setting a new record for the largest such specimen ever caught in Alabama, as well as for the biggest blue marlin ever captured by a female angler within the Gulf of Mexico. A fisherman named Paulo Roberto Amorim reeled in the largest member of the species ever captured, a 1,402-pound Atlantic blue marlin, on February 29, 1992, off Vitória, Brazil. He secured the catch after a 1-hour and 20-minute struggle. The largest marlin ever caught by rod and reel was a black marlin captured by Alfred Glassell Jr. on August 4, 1953, off the coast of Cabo Blanco, Peru. The gargantuan fish measured 14.5 feet long, had a 6.75-foot girth, and weighed 1,560 pounds. Glassell spent an hour and 45 minutes fighting for control of the creature before landing the fish. Greenland Shark. The obscure and rarely seen Greenland shark, which dwells in the frigid waters of the North Atlantic and Arctic Oceans, has the longest known lifespan of any vertebrate, ranging from 300 to 500 years. It's also one of the world's largest shark species, reaching up to 21 feet long and weighing as much as 2,200 pounds. Some experts believe they can grow even bigger than this, perhaps up to 24 feet long and 3,100 pounds. They are so hard to spot to begin with, since they live so deep, that it is always a surprise when someone manages to catch a Greenland shark. On October 17, 1987, Norwegian fishing legend Terje Nordtvedt caught a 1,708-pound specimen using herring as bait. It was the largest ever Greenland shark ever captured off Norway. You would think that humans would stay away from this shark because their meat contains high concentrations of a chemical called trimethylamine enoxide. While this substance helps Greenland sharks stabilize their enzymes in cold, high-pressure waters, it is toxic to humans and can cause severe inebriation. The reason we know this is because this shark meat is a national dish in Iceland. To avoid its poisonous effects, the shark's flesh is hung to dry for 4 to 5 months and fermented, which then makes it safe for human consumption. Tiger shark. In June 1964, a South Carolina fisherman named Walter Maxwell captured a world record-breaking tiger shark at the Cherry Grove Fishing Pier in North Myrtle Beach. It took 2 tries for him to capture the massive creature, and he spent 5 hours wrestling the fish before he finally reeled it in. Throughout the ordeal, Maxwell's friends reportedly poured water on his reel to prevent it from overheating, according to Grand Strand. With their help, he finally got the creature under control and hoisted it on a truck bed. A few days later, the 13.8-foot-long tiger shark officially weighed in at 1,780 pounds, defeating the previous International Game Fish Association record holder by around 300 pounds. 40 years later, in 2004, the record was narrowly defeated off the coast of Ulladulla, Australia, when an angler named Kevin J. Clapson captured a tiger shark weighing just over 11 ounces more than the previous #1 specimen. Because the weights are so close to one another, the 2 record holders are considered tied. Number 2. Great white shark. The largest ever great white shark capture officially recognized by the International Game Fish Association happened off the Ceduna, Australia coast on April 21, 1959, when Alf Dean, a famous shark hunter, caught a 2,664-pound specimen. Conservation laws in most places protect the great white shark from harvest today due to the species' vulnerable status, meaning that Alf Dean's IGFA-approved record is unlikely to change. Every now and then, a great white shark is still captured, but the organization has not acknowledged any potential record breakers. Some people argue that the shark Alf Dean captured in 1959 was not the largest great white ever caught. In 2015, the Discovery Channel allegedly confirmed a 70-year-old legend about 6 men harvesting a monstrous 21-foot-long, 7,000-pound great white shark in Cojimar, a Cuban fishing village east of Havana. But some experts dispute the accuracy of these claims, arguing that the animal in question, nicknamed El Monstruo, or the monster, was 16 feet long and no more than 4,200 pounds. In another unconfirmed potential record-breaking capture of a great white shark, a 5,085-pound, 21-foot-long was reportedly caught off Phillip Island, Australia. There have been other, more verifiable instances of anglers catching great white sharks larger than the one Alf Dean reeled in, but for one reason or another, they are not officially recognized. Take, for example, a group of 3 Australian fishermen who used an endangered baby seal as bait to capture a 3,344-pound great white in 1990. The shark would have qualified as a record breaker if not for the angler's unlawful use of the protected 3-week-old sea lion pup, which earned them $21,000 in legal fines. In 1986, a fisherman named Captain Frank Mundus caught a 3,427-pound great white shark off Montauk, Long Island. Unfortunately, the IGFA denied Mundus the world record based on a technicality: behemoth bony fish. A 2017 study identified the heaviest bony fish ever caught as a 5,070-pound, 8.9-foot-long ocean sunfish that was captured off the Japanese coast and goes by the scientific name Mola alexandrini. The findings, which were published in the journal Ichthyological Research, revealed that the specimen, which was captured in 1996, was initially misidentified as another sunfish species called the mola mola. Informally known as the bump-headed sunfish, M. alexandrini is one of many species that make up the mola genus of sunfishes. Their skeletons are made of bone, unlike cartilaginous marine species such as rays and sharks, and they have a distinctively odd appearance, characterized by large, round bodies, measuring as much as 10 feet long. Scientists have only started to better understand the mola genus in recent years due to the complications associated with studying such large specimens. Their research helped them realize that M. alexandrini is the title holder for the world's heaviest bony fish, and they believe that it's possible for members of this species to grow even larger than the record setter that was captured 24 years ago. In fact, in 2004, researchers caught a 10.9-foot-long bump-headed sunfish, but they failed to weigh it, leaving the world to wonder whether it would have beat the previous record holder. Thanks for watching! Which catch was your favorite? What animal would you like to learn more about? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!